recent transit just happened, of Jupiter moving into sidereal Capricorn. So this is a big shift. Jupiter stays in a sign for a year at a time, and it's going to affect us in a number of different ways. First of all, where Jupiter has been located has been in his own sign of Sagittarius. So we've seen a tendency or a capacity to really reach for high teachings, to go out in the world and be willing to discover different belief systems that might come from different cultures or different backgrounds than your own, and at least willing to look at them, not necessarily assimilate them into your own life. Generally, people who natally have Jupiter in Sagittarius have strong belief systems, and they're not necessarily changing them, but they are able to weigh them or balance them against things they see in the rest of the world. Because it is a fire sign, because it is a sign that actually goes out and does things in the world, there's a tendency to travel and to expand your horizons and see different cultures and see different things and use what you see to better understand your own belief system. This has been in Jupiter's been in Sagittarius since November of 2019, but he did have a little period of time where he moved into Capricorn already. So we already got kind of like a taste of what this is. And that period of time was from March until June. And I don't think I need to tell anybody exactly what that was like, but it definitely brought on a sense of immediate constriction. And the reason is because when Jupiter was in Sagittarius, there's this great optimism, great hope, great capacity for, sort of generosity of spirit. But the shift to Capricorn is one of the harshest for this particular planet because it is going from his own sign into a state of debility. So Capricorn is where we're very much practical. We're grounded in the reality of things and really the stark, cold reality of things. We're really looking at things from this Saturnian perspective of life and death. And this is how much time we have to live, and this is what we have to accomplish in that amount of time, and let's get it done. Not a lot of time for fun, not a lot of time for optimism, not a lot of time for this sort of hope. It's all about just doing what needs to be done, and doing it because there's a long-term goal in mind. And that long-term goal might look like, getting a house or building a house or creating savings or creating a career. But the end game of it is always survival. It's the most survival-based sign. It's like live or die. And you can see this through the symbology of the crocodile, right? This is an animal that just like comes up out of the water and like thrashes its victims around to kill them and eat them. And it sort of brings up a terror for us because it can walk out of the water. It can walk, in places that they have crocodiles or alligators, they actually can walk out into the world and attack people from there. They have this long, snout nose thing with all these teeth, and it's like a, kind of like a walking shark or something that comes out of the water. So this reptilian creature brings up our fear. It brings up our reptile brain. It brings up our fight or flight syndrome and our knowledge and awareness that we all have built within us that we're going to die one day. We will definitely die one day. It's kind of one of the only things we know is that we were born and that we will die. So this Capricorn sign really, brings out that energy, and that might work really well for certain planets. It does for its own sign of Saturn, or its own ruler of Saturn, who is in Capricorn right now and has been since January. There we have really appropriate fear and really appropriate caution and a capacity to accept the stark cold reality of life and even pull ourselves away from our attachments, pull ourselves away from our social attachments, as well as our material attachments, and really just accept life in its sort of bleakest state, where we can maybe even move past the depression of that or this, the sadness in that, and move into the relief of letting go of that attachment, just knowing that there's nothing we can really do about anything. We will one day die, and therefore we might as well live sort of free in that. If you've ever met an older person who's really just kind of let go of all their attachments, they've had their life, they've lived maybe a very challenging life, and they are, they no longer live for others. They no longer live for all these other things outside of themselves. They just are, and they're really unaware or unconcerned with the results of anything they do and how it affects everybody else and everything. And that it's a freedom. It's a freedom of a sort. Especially if you can really turn that into meditating and, you know, sitting with yourself, and that cold, stark reality being more about just being able to find the silence and the capacity to settle into the solitude instead of feeling lonely and alone in it. So there's a lot of wisdom when Saturn is in its own sign of Capricorn, and that's going to help this Jupiter for sure. Mars is the other planet that does really well in Capricorn. It's exalted there, and his, you know, fiery, active nature has something to do. There's a goal. Build this house, you know, keep us alive, do these things in order to survive. Mars really has a great functionality there because it's the planet of action. It's where we're acting, and we want a channel. We want a channel for that action to go, because if we don't, then we end up feeling really frustrated, and our anger comes out in different ways, and we don't have a physical, you know, if we don't have a physical path for that anger to go in, it's going to burble out in all these other ways. So those two planets do really well there. Well, unfortunately, Jupiter does not, because Jupiter is where we want to expand. It's where we want to be generous. It's where we want to, like I was saying with Sagittarius, we want to be able to go out and see beliefs and understand them from other people's perspectives and cultures, and then infiltrate them into our own understanding of our own belief systems. We want to be able to, you know, where Jupiter's exalted is across the way in Cancer. And you can see how Jupiter does really well in all the water signs. His own sign of Pisces, his other sign, other than Sagittarius, his feminine sign is Pisces and Scorpio. Jupiter does really well in these signs because there's an emotional quality, a nurturing quality, there's a softness there when it comes to finding our wisdom, because a lot of the wisest things we come upon don't come on us by this sort of hard, rigid work of Capricorn, right? That's how we get maybe knowledge, but wisdom, true wisdom, really tends to come to us from like almost a magical place, right? We have these awarenesses, these moments, these realizations, these elevated experiences that are really beyond time and space, that bring us the true magic and the true, like the download that's just like, aha, this is it. And there's work that needs to be done past that. Like you can't just live based on these sort of magical experiences that you have. That's not going to get you sort of the whole way, but it does open a door and give us a lot of hope and a lot of inspiration and reason to even try. When we feel kind of constricted and bleak and like, the world is this sort of cold, harsh place, it's hard to feel inspired, and it's hard to feel that hope and that inspiration that we need in order to actually move out and find more expansive ways of seeing things. We see things in this sort of like, it's like this, these are the only options. These are the only choices. We're going to, you know, we're all going to die, and this is how it happens. And so we're not able to move past that to something more beautiful or amazing that might exist beyond that. Specifically, like I was saying, Jupiter is exalted in Cancer, where we're unconditionally loving. Cancer is where we find, you know, love and nurturance that doesn't need an immediate return. So when you meet one of those teachers, or you know, see a mother with their child, there's a quality of, I don't expect back from you what you're giving to me, right? I don't expect that you give me anything, really. I'm giving this because this is what I'm here to do. And the return on that investment comes, but not because it's expected or even needed or wanted on the front end. It's actually coming for the other person, right? So the child gets something out of being loving and nurturing back to his mother. The student gets something by being loving and nurturing back to their teacher. Traditionally, a student, which would be called a chela, would go to the guru, would go to their teacher and give them everything and anything they could. They would give them their, the fruits off their trees, whatever they'd harvested. They would work, they would sweep and clean and clean even, dirty places, like the bathroom or the toilet area. The idea of going to your teacher was to lay yourself at their feet and literally give them anything you could. And if you had money, then of course you could give them money, but poor people or people who had maybe modest means would give all of themselves. And that would be better than giving money, because if you have money to give, note that most people who are generous and have money to give often are not giving. They're not giving the shirt off their back. They're not giving the food they need to eat that night. They're giving like what they want to give and a little slice of what's totally expendable to them and not necessary for their life at all. Whereas if somebody is of very modest means and they're giving something, they could be giving the very food that they might have needed to eat that night, or they might have, fasted for several days just to give this food to their teacher. They might not have more, or even enough for themselves, and still they give and still they give. So that's a quality of unconditional living or unconditional loving that's much higher and more elevated, and truly understanding of the idea that it all does just kind of come back around. We're not in this world of wisdom. We're not trying to get wisdom like we're trying to get an object. We don't buy wisdom the same way we do buy other things. It's not something that you just get because you pay X amount of dollars. It's something you have to put the work into. And a lot of the work is that self-sacrifice. It is that capacity to give without expecting anything in return, to happily and merrily clean a toilet bowl and not worry about, but I'm not doing these things that are going to get me to wisdom. I'm not taking these steps that are going to get me there, because this is the road and that's wisdom and I need to get there and I need to have enlightenment. A lot of times you'll meet teachers and, especially yoga teachers who might have this fixation with enlightenment and finding it. And just that fixation on it is sort of like going to be a challenge, going to be a hurdle to getting there. If that's your fixation, if that's what you're trying to do, it's going to be a lot harder to get there than if you take the other paths of yoga. If you take the path of bhakti, which is devotion, or karma yoga, which is selfless service, which is a lot of what I'm talking about here, or jnana yoga, which is it's the yoga of wisdom. It's the yoga of learning. It's where you study the texts and you actually study all the wisdom that came before you. And you do need that, you do need to learn that. But much like asana practice and the austerities involved in, what we often look at as yoga, I shouldn't say traditionally, but what we often look at yoga, especially in the West, those practices are mainly sort of selfish. There's a goal in mind. If I want to attain enlightenment, again, I want to do these poses and maybe I want to get stronger or more flexible, or maybe I specifically want to master this one pose and I want to, attain this wisdom and know this knowledge so I can be enlightened, so I can advance, as opposed to this idea that you're giving and offering something. So this is going to be a lot of what we see in this time coming up is well, it's here. It's already here because I'm filming this after the date. The actual transit happened here in Hawaii. It actually happened the night of the night of November 19th, but most places it was really kind of the 20th. So and actually I'm going to share that chart so that you can see it. And so here is the night of the night. You can see here in, the 19th, it was 11 o'clock at night and it's still at 0 degrees here. And so this transit is a year-long transit, so it's going to affect us for a while. And it's actually going to Jupiter's going to jump into Aquarius, just like it did jump into Capricorn last year. And then when it goes retrograde, it'll move back into Capricorn again. So I'm going to talk about those transits in a minute. But one of the things we should note right off the bat is that Jupiter is joined Saturn here, right? Saturn's in his own sign. And the day it happened, of course, the moon was joined as well. But Jupiter and Saturn together in general pose a threat to the idea of expansive wisdom, right? Just because of all those things I discussed about Capricorn itself, we have Saturn being the Lord of Capricorn. It's the ruler of Capricorn. So we get that quality of Capricorn from Saturn, and it's cold, it's stark, it's definitely not religious, but it's also not necessarily spiritual, because it can take away all the spirit right out of our teachings and our wisdom. We don't just move away from the dogma in religion, we end up moving away from all of it. We end up moving away from the spiritual at all, from that part of us that does just download our wisdom, that does just, is just here as beings and part of the divinity. And we lose that divinity in many ways. A lot of times when you see Saturn Jupiter conjunctions or direct aspects in someone's chart, there's a quality of atheism involved. Now, depending on the signs, there can be a quality where they're not engaged in a specific religion, but still spiritual. But in Capricorn, again, there's gonna be more fear-based going on than there is going to be a much of a chance for that more enlightening quality, where we're just moving away from the dogma of religion, but really sticking into the principles of spirituality that connect us to source, which is really what we're doing in any religious practice or spiritual practice. And you'll note that no matter what religion you're talking about, there are always going to be practitioners who are going to be completely stuck in the dogma. And there are going to be those people who really see the light, no matter what it is. And no matter how much you disagree with any specific religion, there are people who are practicing it with such open hearts and such a true connection to source that it does not matter what they're practicing, actually. And then there are those who are so stuck in their rigid way of thinking and their idea that the steps are the point, that they'll never really see the light, no matter what, no matter how good of a practice they're doing, or no matter how wonderful their teacher is, or no matter how wonderful the teachings are that they're following. You'll always see that. So this Jupiter-Saturn conjunction is troubling in some ways, because you can see not only the constriction of Jupiter itself, but stick that with Saturn, who's really going to put even more pressure, even more of that cold, harsh reality there. Now, the positive here is that Saturn is going to, as I said before, is in good dignity. So Saturn's in his own sign, and this means that we might have a tendency to meditate, or to really accept the aloneness of our state here on Earth. We came in here alone and we will leave alone, sort of idea. Even though we were very much in our mother's belly and came out, and hopefully she was right there for us, we still have this sort of solo journey in it all. There's a part of it that our parents can't ease, that teachers can't ease, that no one can really ease in the journey, right? No teaching, no teacher, no person can ease that part. That's just, it's just a cold, hard reality, right? We're here, and we're here for however long we are, and then we're out. And that's our own, when we die, we'll be alone in that. So Saturn brings us a lot of awareness around that, and we might be able to really tap into our more meditative qualities and our more, that part of our spiritual practice a lot. But the other thing that we're going to see is that Jupiter is, related, first of all, to our vitality. It's related to our capacity to sort of be healthy. And the biggest health, again, doesn't come from these sort of strict austerities and things that people put on themselves. You don't find a lot of health because you did all these strict things to keep yourself healthy. Really, health comes from like a state of mind and a quality of being kind to yourself. And we, again, see that through Jupiter being exalted in Cancer. We see that when children, all the studies they do on children, when they're in nourishing environments, when they're well nourished, when they're treated well, they do better, they thrive better, their health is better, everything overall is better because their outlook is better. When you have optimism and a positive outlook, you're going to thrive on every level more than when you are in this sort of constricted, cold reality of austerities and, really depression, because everything is so, rigid and going to a goal. You know, there's a focus, there's a goal. You can't stop and smell the roses. You can't, you know, take anything for joy. It's all about what you need. And that's really harsh for your health and for your well-being. But Jupiter also is about sort of rules and guidance, judges, courtrooms, you know, contracts, things that are made into law or made into like these orders that we've seen. And we really saw that from March to June. We had a sweep of mandates and orders that were made by governors, and these, you know, these dictates were Jupiterian in nature, and they were specifically focused on keeping us alive, right? Survival. Do what you have to do to live. And that's what we're going to see again. What we're really going to see more of is that sort of constricting quality of, you know, maybe stay in, you know, maybe we'll see more stay-ins. I think there actually was some curfews and things like that imposed right about as this transit was happening in California. I was in California, and I left and came back to Hawaii, but I know we did have a tightening of our people flying in here, the quarantine and how that was working. They had kind of loosened that up, and there was a direct tightening of that again, that the decision was made right when this transit was happening, just a few days ago. So there is that, you know, there is that quality of restricting, tightening, health being more about survival than thrival. Not that that's a word, but, you know, more about living and dying than, you know, really thriving in your healthiest self. The other thing about that is that Jupiter represents generosity and money and our abundance. And this is going to be in a constricted sign again. So we will, you know, can expect sort of austere rulings going forward in terms of what we are given or offered or helped with in terms of the government, when they make these lockdowns, when they make these mandates, you know, and how it affects people and their ability to make, you know, to go to work, or to have their business open or whatever. We can expect more austerities being put on us, on people. So, you know, some of it will be self-imposed because Saturn is there. And again, that's sort of the healthy fear where we self-decide to make a choice. Like maybe we decide to spend more time at home, or we decide to keep ourselves safe or keep distance, especially if we know that we have health problems and we know that we're somebody who, you know, really should do that. The Jupiter part is where it's not as intelligent or divinely, you know, divinely connected, where it's really coming more from a cold, hard fear and really moving God out of it. So we can plan on and know that will happen. Like I said, Jupiter is actually going to move out of Capricorn, and it's going to happen in, let's see if I can get this function going. It's going to happen in April. So I think it was April, yeah, it's earlier in April. It's like April 5th, but you can see here April 18th, he's already in, well into 2 degrees in. So that is also not good dignity for Jupiter. It's Saturn's other sign, it's Aquarius. It's a sign that's humanitarian. So we could see there being a pull for more, you know, humanitarian policies. It's very much about equality, especially taking care of people who are poor on the lower rungs of society, futuristic visions of things, you know, ways that we can reconfigure society or systems of doing things in order to create a more equal society. That's a lot of what Jupiter and Aquarius can do. Let's see, it's going to be there for, okay, so it's in June, it's still there, it's in retrograde, it's there, it's retrograde in July. I don't know the exact date yet that it's retrograde. Sorry, I haven't gone that far, but so it makes it to about, you know, 6-7 degrees and then starts going backwards again and go back into Capricorn. And we see by September 15th, he's back into Capricorn again. And then November 20th of 2021 is when he'll be moving into Aquarius officially. So we'll have a little taste again. It'll be that same thing we had before, a taste of what it's like. But this one's going to be longer, April to September. That's almost 6 months. where we're going to be. Well, it's like 5 months that we're going to have that, whereas before it was only 3 months where we had Jupiter and Capricorn for a little while. So we'll have a longer taste of what it's like. Jupiter and Saturn both go retrograde for really a lot of the year, like 4 months to 6 months. So that period is also a period where we're really rethinking things, and we're really like, did we do this right? Is this the way we want to, to be operating in the world? And that's an opportunity to, it's an opportunity to really rethink some of the choices we make, some of the things we agree to, and stuff like that. But one thing we need to be aware of is that wherever our mind is in these different moments, wherever we are going in these different transits, sometimes the things that happen during that time don't ever get reversed. That it's not like, oh, well, now we have a different mindset, so let's change that. It's, the legislation and things like that often don't get reversed. So that's, one thing to really keep in mind. And we can look back in time and see that with the, the Patriot Act that happened when we were in our last time that we had Rahu in the north, Rahu in Taurus and Ketu in Scorpio. We went into Iraq and we invaded Iraq after 9/11. It was the same sort of nodal axis that we just had. We had 9/11 during the Gemini Sagittarius axis, and then we had the Iraq war during the Rahu and Taurus, Ketu and Scorpio axis that we're in now. And that was when the Patriot Act got passed, was during that time, because people were really scared, so scared they were willing to submit to surveillance. And that is still in effect now. So, these things do go forward with us, and that's something to really keep into mind. I do have a breakdown of this for all 12 signs. So each of us are going to be affected really differently. For each of us, depending on your rising sign, you're not necessarily going to be experiencing such a harsh, cold reality. You might actually have a really thriving time for your career, or this might be a great time for your relationship. Some of you, it's going to be maybe a really hard time for you. So I've broken it down for each sign, and I wrote it up, and it's part of my newsletter. So if you sign up on my newsletter, it's www.radha, R-A-D-H-A, home, H-O-M-E, yoga, Y-O-G-A.com. You can get that free report sent to you. And you will still be getting Rahu in Taurus, Ketu in Scorpio for all 12 signs also. So you get 2 reports. And this is a great way to really understand how it's going to affect you. Because like I said, it's not going to be the same for everyone. For some people, it's going to be a very, very harsh alignment. For others of us, it's really going to be a chance to bring something we've been working on into fruition. If you're a Pisces rising, for example, Jupiter is your first lord, and it's also your 10th lord, and it's been in your 10th house. So you've been sort of brewing your career or something that you're working on, and external responsibilities, your status, something that you really wanted to, kind of manifest in your career, which is a big part of your identity because you do have joint rulership between your first and 10th lord. Well, that's going to be moving into your 10th house. Your 11th house of community and of higher ambitions and things you want to create in the world. So you might really be lifting that work you've been doing onto a higher plane. That's not going to feel super constricted to you. It's going to feel like hard work that maybe as a Pisces person you don't always love to do. Maybe sometimes it feels a little bit challenging to you to have a goal, a specific goal, and really like work it all the way through. But this is an opportunity for you to really tap into that energy. So that's just one example of a rising sign that's going to actually sort of maybe thrive during this period, or at least have a chance to do something that's productive for them. There's some downside to that too, that there can be disappointment, and the illusion and fantasies might make you feel disappointed. But I write about all that in my report. So if you're not already an email subscriber, go ahead and do that, and you will get that Jupiter in Capricorn for all 12 signs. I hope this was helpful to you one way or another. You can share, like, it's a great way to support and spread the word. And if you are already an email subscriber, don't worry, you'll be getting that in your inbox soon. Hope you have a beautiful and blessed day, and we'll see you really soon. Namaste. Aloha, namaste. I'm here to